First, tonight's top pundits. We have political commentator Annunziata Rees-Mogg. We have the former Conservative MP, Sir Michael Fabricant, and TV news legend, the one and only, the marvellous Michael Crick. Michael, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
This has been a dog's dinner of a budget, hasn't it? And it's the gift that keeps on giving for Labour's critics. Well,
I don't agree with everything in the budget. I think they did go too far on employers' national insurance contributions and on inheritance tax for farmers. I think there's a lack of... I think the problem the Labour Party has is they got far too few people who have experience of running businesses and knowing anything about farming, although now they've got 100 MPs who've actually got quite rural constituencies. But, hey, what's going to really damage the British economy is if Donald Trump goes ahead and puts 20% tariffs on. And for a free marketeer like yourself, you should have mentioned that. You didn't. Why not?
Well, Trump's tariffs are a problem,
yeah.
Which is why actually Brexit is a potential opportunity. As an independent sovereign nation, we can strike an individual trade deal with America to avoid those tariffs.
If we were still in Europe, we could join with the Europeans and we could have a lot more muscle. And there's going to be a whole range of issues over the next 4 years, where if we were still in Europe and working together with Europe, then we would be in a better position than going it alone.
OK, Michael, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I don't agree with this at all, because one of the problems that Trump identified last time round was that East Europe has incredibly low wage costs. And Eastern Europe is the very area that he feels competes unfairly with that of the United States. The point that you make, Mark, is bang on, because the view in the Trump Republican Party is that, you know what? Wage costs in the US are similar to that of the UK, so there's a far greater possibility of our actually forming a trade deal.
And also, we sell mainly services to America rather than cars and other sort of manufactured goods.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're no threat to Detroit, Michigan, are we?
No, and it would be fair competition if there were, because our on costs are the same. Eastern Europe is not the case, and that is why they were never going to do a deal with the European Union. Okay. Particularly as there are unfair subsidies as well done by the European Union. Some would argue in breach of the World Trade Organization rules, and certainly not trusted by Donald Trump.
Michael, to be fair to Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Rees, this is the economic inheritance that they have from the Conservatives, isn't it? They don't want to raise taxes.
No, I mean, Labour overpromised, in my view, and in the end they didn't have to. But if in the unlikely event that Jeremy Hunt came back, he would have had to have done something, which
probably
would probably have had a
austerity,
cuts or rises in taxes, or one of those things, which equally has a dampening effect on the economy. So it was going to be, unless you're going to make drastic cuts.
The Tories would have dented growth as well.
They gave away, and by they I'm talking about old Labour, because let's not be in any doubt this is an old Labour administration.
With a huge mandate to govern.
With a huge mandate to govern. And what did they do? They spent £20 billion, and funnily enough, that was supposed to be the black hole, on buying off the trade unions for nothing in exchange.
Michael,
I was on a train today, I was hoping to catch a train this morning, which was cancelled because there wasn't a driver, there wasn't staff. Now, how would you go and get train drivers without giving train drivers a pay rise?
Well, that's right. The Tories would have had to have done a deal with the junior doctors and with the train drivers.
I'm not so sure we did, because if you remember, with Jeremy Hunt, there was a junior doctors dispute, and Jeremy Hunt actually saw them down when he was health secretary. Okay. No, I don't agree with this at all, and the idea that there's a shortage of drivers because of that. There's a shortage of drivers because there's been a lack of training being done by some of the companies.
Well, that may be true as well, and indeed,
but this is an old Labour government, and I'll give you a reason why. Tony Blair would not touch with a barge pole, and it was offered to him, this idea of breaking up farms with getting rid of inheritance tax loopholes.
I think. And will Trump's victory influence life for us in the UK, Michael?
Yes, it will, because he doesn't believe in the orthodoxy. Just to go abroad, for example, don't forget it was Trump that organised the peace arrangements with the Arab countries and Israel. And it was fear of Trump and that there would be an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel that started the whole October 8th Hamas attack encouraged by Iran. And I think it's fascinating, isn't it, that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, is saying quite rightly, and this is being backed up by the Trump team, that they see eye to eye on Iran. And if we say, well, what has that got to do with Britain? How many British soldiers have been killed or maimed with IEDs and other explosive devices supplied to terrorist organisations by Iran? And so I think we'll find now that there is going to be a fresh approach to international politics and a fresh approach that will benefit the United Kingdom, particularly if we can do that trade deal now, which was beginning to work out with Boris and Trump, but then, of course, that didn't go any further.
Do you think Sir Keir Starmer will seize the opportunity to get a trade deal across the line?
I'm not convinced he'll want to do it. He will want to do it.
Well, he has to choose, doesn't he? Either he goes into the bosom of the EU or he goes west to the United States.
Well,
you can't have both, can you? You can't be in the EU's regulatory orbit and do a deal with America.
Well, I would hope, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I would hope that Starmer recognises we have left the EU and we don't want to start entertaining any idea now that we're going to get back into that orbit. But you're all right. It's either one or the other, and I know where our future lies. It lies with English-speaking countries, with English law, because the Americans have the English jurisprudence system.
With growing markets?
With growing markets, and don't forget Europe is actually declining, not only compared to the United States, but compared to other developing countries in the Far East.
Michael, is a Trump-style revolution coming to our shores in 4 years' time?
No. Thank goodness. I mean, let's remember, the Trump-style revolution involves the first criminal to be president of the United States, a man who tried to overthrow
bad bookkeeping.
Sorry?
But he's a felon because of bad bookkeeping.
And would he have been prosecuted if it hadn't been the fact that it was Trump?
It wasn't a clerical error. It was much worse than that. He had several other prosecutions in the pipeline. This is a man who
paid off his mistress.
Who still denies that he lost the election in 2020. This man is bad for democracy throughout the West. He's undermined democracy.
Tell that to 73 million Americans.
No, but he has a contempt for democracy. You know, and he showed that in 2020, and he showed that at points in this campaign. He dislikes international institutions, cooperative institutions, like the Paris deal, NATO, the UN, the European Union.
No, that's untrue. First of all, with NATO, he backs NATO. All he's saying...
Well, we're not clear that he does back NATO. He's threatened to leave NATO.
No. He has said that he would stay in NATO and support NATO, providing other countries pay their fair whack. And you know what?
He has said that.
I agree
this is the problem with Trump, that he says one thing one day and one thing another day, but he has talked about leaving NATO, and the other members of NATO, quite rightly, in my view, and we should have been doing this a lot earlier, have been paying more. But NATO
thanks to Trump.
No, but this started actually before Trump. It started 2014.
But he held their feet to the fire, didn't he?
That's right.
Well, there was an element there, and you know, it's one of the few things on which I agree with Trump, that the other members of NATO do have to put more in. I mean, you know,
but Michael, let's go through my list.
And look at what about Ukraine? All right, go through your list.
Well, let me go through it.
Open borders. You say it's an end to open borders. Yeah, pull the other one. Well, he said that in 2016.
The numbers doubled.
What happened to the wall? What happened to the wall? It ends up in the middle of nowhere.
Let me tell you that the numbers doubled when Joe Biden came into the White House, and 11 million people have entered America illegally in the last 4 years.
But you said in your monologue it's an end to open borders. We cannot...
I said an effective open border, which is what it is.
I'm not saying it's a good thing that all this immigration is taking...
Illegal immigration here.
But that it's very, very difficult to stop. And all of these issues are incredibly complicated. Ukraine, the relationship with Russia, trade, all of these things are incredibly complicated. And I suspect the story of the second Trump presidency will not be as great as you think it's going to be, and probably won't as bad as I fear it's going to be.
I think there wouldn't have been a Ukraine if it hadn't been for the fact that Biden was weak.